So did you know that RV sales have skyrocketed over 600% compared to this time last year? You probably did. Um, but with tons of videos out there, and some of them that you've probably seen, there are people that are experts that are telling people what to do and what to consider before they buy an RV or before they hit the road. But I'll be really honest, there are three questions that I've never seen some of these experts ask before people hit the road. And I think they're super important. So if you are ready to buy an RV, or maybe you've already got one, but you haven't thought through these three questions, then I don't know if you're really totally prepared for your journey. And so I want to try to help you avoid that problem. So my plan is to start going live every week to cover some of the tips and tricks that you're going to need to know if you plan on spending any time in your RV yourself. So I want you to start thinking through the challenges and some of the hurdles that you've thought about with regards to your RV. And I want you to think through some of the issues that you're bumping up against that you wish you could get some advice on. And I want you to drop some of those below. And I'm going to try to answer those in the upcoming videos just to give me some ideas of what it is you want to hear people talk about. So even if you're watching the replay, stick it down there and I'll be sure to get to it in one of the upcoming videos. So if we haven't met before, my name's Jim Miller, and I help families have a clear path to smoothly transition their lives into the RV that's perfect for their family so that they can live the dream that they never thought possible. Now, whether it's for 14 days or for 14 months, the way I do this is through my signature maps process, walking my clients through all the steps they need in order to take their next adventure. So let's dig in. You guys ready? Before you hit the road, the first question that I really want you to think through and to make sure that you answer has to do with your mindset. So let me get some technology going here. Um, it's your mindset. I want you to think about um, what are the changes that I need to make in my expectations or in my mindset before I get in the RV, right? Before we started traveling in our RV for a full year, so over 12 months, I would say maybe even 2 years, God had been whispering in Amy's ear and in my ear separately that we need to simplify our lives. And we actually had been through that process for like 6 months individually, thinking, what do we need to do to simplify? What does that even mean? 6 months before we came together and said, man, I really got to be honest. God's really telling me this. And, and we were both like, what? And so it was one of those moments that we realized that God was trying to do something different with us than we had been doing before. And so we really started to press into that. The fact is that if you're going to be in an RV for any length of time, then you need to check out and make sure um, that you are ready for some of the differences that you're going to experience in an RV. And those are expectations that you can meet up front. And they're really simple things to address. But if you don't address them, you're going to be really frustrated and disappointed in your time in the RV. But just for an example, if you're going to spend any length of time in your RV, like if you're going to be in there for 6 months or a year, then you may not be able to bring your whole spring wardrobe. And that's okay. That's all right. But you need to know that in advance so that as you start to pack all your clothes, that you're not really angry about what you can't get in there, that you realize um, that you've got a blessing of all the things that you could get in there. Okay. So the first one is going to be that mindset. That's going to be a big one for you to address. And we talk about also this idea of just what we talked about, what I mentioned a minute ago, that simplifying your life is going to be a key in that whole process. So as you simplify your life, what does that look like? How is it that you step into that process, and what are the results going to be in the long term? The fact is, and I know you've heard this before, but if you have a hard time giving something up, one of your possessions. So if you have a hard time giving up your car, if you have a hard time giving up your grill in the backyard, if you have a hard time giving up um, all of your toys that you've got at the house, then you don't own those possessions, they own you. And so we need to be sure that we are the one conquering those possessions and it's not the other way around. So that mindset is a huge thing that people need to address before they get into it. So you need to set your mind before it happens. Set your mind before it happens. That's that mindset hurdle that needs to happen. Okay. And the second one is, in my view, this is the biggest one. So if you don't hear anything else that I say, I want you to listen to this for the next 3 or 4 minutes and make sure that you understand what I'm talking about. Okay. Because this is a big deal. So the first one is mindset. And then the second one is going to be aspirations. Now, um, oh my gosh, I just had an 80s flashback. Forgive me. But did anybody else have an aspiration flashback when I just said that? Aspirations in the cloud, but your hopes go down the drain. Never mind. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that to you. But aspirations are your hopes and dreams, right? Your hopes and dreams that you want. Um, and just like the song says, we've got these aspirations that are in the clouds sometimes, but the hopes go down the drain. But for you, what is it that really is the ultimate purpose in you spending time on the road? And I'll be honest, we didn't do a great job of addressing this beforehand. We hit the simplify thing really well. And I think God kind of walked us in that process that made it so that it was a lot smoother for us to get into the RV. But ultimately, there has to be a purpose that you've got in traveling. Now, if you've got kids, that can look totally different than if you're retired. And if you're retired, it can look totally different than if you're a single person. Uh, and those are all great, and that's amazing. I have a good friend, Brian, and we talk about all the time that he has peace when he goes out into nature, and he wants to just get a van that he can go travel in and spend a weekend at a time and just go park somewhere so that he has some peace as he gets away from the crazy and the hectic of the world that's around him. And I love that. I love it. And so for him, his ultimate aspiration might be peace. For us as parents, we wanted to simplify our lives so that our kids weren't going crazy, and that their parents weren't going crazy, right? Um, but I realized an even greater level of our aspiration had been met when like a year and a half into our travels, we're driving down the road and 6-year-old Micah is in the back seat and he says, "Hey, Dad, look, that over there used to be a volcano." And I said, "Micah, how do you know that was a volcano?" And he says, "Look, it's covered in basalt." And so, I grabbed my phone, did what is basalt? And I asked what basalt was because I didn't remember. I didn't know that. I had studied that. I knew I'd studied it in seventh grade. But here, this 6-year-old is now identifying and relating to it and making connections with the geography and the environment. And so at that point, Amy and I realized that the education that our boys had received on the road was mind boggling in its magnitude. And they understood things at a heart level that I never understood because I'd only learned it in a head level. And so maybe as a parent, your aspiration would be to give your kid experiences or to give them an education or to help them to develop character or to help them to not be so tied into a community that maybe isn't the best for them and for their development and their mental development. So, as a single person, maybe you recognize that this country, this beautiful country that we live in, there's so much more to know about it. That was the other thing that as we started traveling, and you see that we've only hit like 25 states, which is amazing to me that we've only hit half, maybe not even half the states in our country. But just in the time that we've traveled around the country, we have begun to see that I didn't know anything about America. I mean, honestly, I didn't know anything about our country. I didn't know anything about its people. I did not know a thing about its cultures. I only thought that I knew what America was like. I only thought that I knew what the people in America were like. But then as we started to go to Albuquerque and 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 ran into and got to develop some relationships with people there, and then we went to Colorado, and those people are totally different. And so we got to build some relationships with some great Colorado people. And then we went to California, and we were in Southern California, and then Northern California, which if you didn't know, and I didn't know this to the extent, but those are two totally different countries, in my opinion. And I think most Californians would agree. There's a big battle between Southern California, Northern California. And I was amazed to see the difference between those two parts of the state. Um, and so we started to realize that Mississippi and Florida and Georgia and Virginia. They all have their own personality, and the people there have their own personalities too. And so, as we got to experience all those different cultures, it has enriched our lives and made us richer for the experience. And so that is a great aspiration to have, is to be able to experience America. And I can't wait to go up to Vermont and New Hampshire, and I can't wait to get up to um, to Kansas and spend some more time there. And I can't wait to get up to Oregon and Washington State, all these different places where I haven't been able to spend any time to get to know those folks. So that is a tremendous thing to look at. And so, what ultimately is the purpose for your travel, right? What ultimately is the purpose for your travel? And I'll say this too, I don't want to diminish the fact that vacation is a great aspiration to have. We sometimes we need a week to unplug, and that's okay. But but then again, let's make sure that we're really distinct about that aspiration so that we know what it is that we're getting into before we get into it. Okay? Everybody got that? All right. So now the third one. So we got mindset, we got aspiration, and now we've got the my wife's favorite, planning. Everybody ready for this? Planning. So when you live in an RV, I want you to think of this, that every week or every month, you take the house that you live in right now and you shake it like this for a couple hours. Okay? And then at the end of the couple hours, you give it a break and you let it rest. And then a week or a month later, you do the same thing again. You shake your house. What do you think is the first thing that's going to enter your mind? Something's going to break. Yes. And if you thought that owning a house meant that you were going to have to deal with little hiccups and things breaking and leaking and falling apart, wait till you get in an RV. You've heard the phrase before. This is a common refrain, but it's not if something's going to go wrong, it's when. And so part of your planning and part of that mindset process that we talked about a minute ago is recognizing that there is a plan that you need to come up with for what happens when something breaks. If you didn't plan for the break, then it's going to bite you, and it's going to be worse than it could have been. But if you planned ahead for it and you know about it and you set your eyes on the fact that it's going to come, it's not that big a deal. I mean, it's not that it isn't a big deal, but it's not as big a deal as it could have been. Just for an example, our refrigerator break. We had a refrigerator that just quit working. Okay, and so we had only had that refrigerator for a couple months before it busted. And because of our travel schedule, because of where we were in the country when it happened, it was over a month before we got a refrigerator back. Now, that was ruinous in many ways, but at the same time, we rolled with the punches because we were used to the fact that traveling in an RV is going to cause issues. We were headed west on I-10 in rush hour on the opposite side, the far side of Tucson, and our tire blew. And it was almost a mile before the next exit, of course. And so that was a huge issue. And so we ended up spending 2 hours on the side of the road waiting for a tow truck to come that could lift the RV up and put our spare tire on there so that we could get back on the road again. Now, if we had not had a plan in place for that, then we would have been in even a bigger world of hurt. And so just making those little contingency plans for things going wrong is really important. But then also there's the fun plan, right? There's a plan of where are you going to go? How long you're going to stay there? What are you going to see while you're there? And this was one of the biggest lessons for us because we would go and travel to a part of the country thinking, oh man, I can't wait to go see this and that. But when we left that place, there were more things on our list that we wanted to see than before we even got there. That has happened almost every place we've gone. And it was reflected in a question that I got asked and the answer that came to mind when I was at home. We were back home visiting our home church in Houston, in the Kingwood area. And I was standing there talking to some friends, and one of them asked, he said, so what's your favorite place that you've been to? And I'm like, gosh, well, that depends on what you mean. Is it family friendly, adventure friendly? Is it beautiful friendly? Is it quiet friendly? Because all of those have different answers, right? They're all different places. There's so many different things that were favorites in different ways. And he said, well, so how about this? If you found out you had a week to live, where would be the place you would go back to? I said, well, gosh, thanks for thanks for the morbid question, John. Appreciate that. Um, but I said, you know, with what we've experienced in the last year, at that point it had been a little over a year. I said I would go to some place we've never been before because there's so much to experience. I want to go to a place and get something new under my belt and have a brand new experience and a new adventure that our boys could love. And so that was a different approach. I never thought that I would have said that, because in my mind before we started traveling, I would always say, "Oh, if I could have a vacation right now, I would go back to the place where, um, I would go back to the place where this or that." So, yeah, there's so many beautiful cultures to experience and different types of people and weather. It's really remarkable to see. And so, uh, that was my answer, that I wanted to go to a place where I'd never been so that we could experience something we'd never experienced. But that's part of the planning. And so we have some tools and tricks that we use and some expert insider tricks that we use to find some amazing places to stay and some things to do on your travels as you're going from one city to the next and one destination to the next. But but those are all things that you want to think about too. And I know with an RV, the RVs are expensive and the accessories for the RVs are expensive, especially now that there's so much of a demand for them. And there are some accessories that we bought, and I was like, we're spending some good money on this because I am not going to mess around. And then as we've traveled, I got rid of those things, and I don't. They've stayed in the glove box or in a closet, and we've never pulled them out to use it because they just weren't very valuable to us. And so there's a lot of stuff that we spent $400 on a pump for our tires, and we did not overspend on that. And then we spent $100 on some other stuff that we've never used. And so knowing the difference between the things that are vital versus the things that are not is going to save you a lot of money. And so we want to share some of that wisdom with you guys as well, and to be able to give our experience so that you can take the bits and pieces of it and put it together to figure out when you're planning what to get, where to go, how to get there, how much time to spend there, that you have some tools and resources that are going to help make that a better transition, a better trip for you. So, after you've addressed these and a few other issues that we're not even getting hitting in today, because this is just an overview, after you've addressed those issues, there's a process in this that is, what we call it set go, right? So we've talked about mindset, aspirations, planning, and now the set go. And that set go is a big deal too, right? You have to, if you just have a dream of doing something, how often do your dreams just stay really big and then eventually they just fade and they never happen? And you look back one day and you go, oh man, we always wanted to do that, but we never did. Oh, okay. So talking about dreams, I'm going to tell you this quick story because I want you to feel this with me. Okay. So my brothers and I were sitting in my apartment in Houston, Texas, and it was the middle of a vacation period. And so it's my two younger brothers and me, so the three guys, and we're sitting in Houston and we're having a conversation about stuff that we want to do. And I realized that the Grand Canyon was like a 24-hour drive from us. And we had 3 days before it was time for us to split back up and go back to our respective cities where we were going to be. And I looked at my brothers and I was like, bros, I've got the best idea ever. The Grand Canyon is 24 hours away. Let's the three of us jump in a car, drive to the Grand Canyon. We can rotate driving so we can get there in 24 hours, and then we'll have a full day to walk around the canyon and to experience it. And my brothers were like, that sounds like a bad idea. And so we didn't do it. How'd that feel? Let that sit for a minute. How did that feel when I said that? I know in your brain you were like, that would be so amazing. You're making experiences, memories. You'll never forget that. Well, I have never forgotten the feeling of saying no and not doing it. And every time I share that story with somebody, what do they say? Ah, and it sucks the life out of you for a minute. And I want you to think about that down the road. When you think about this later, you are going to look back on your experience and say, hmm, That was a missed opportunity. Yes, Amy, that's right. That was a missed opportunity. That was a big regret that I have. And I wish I could go back and change that. I wish I could go back and change it. But part of me in my mind was like, I've seen pictures of the Grand Canyon and it's amazing, but I don't know. I don't know if it's worth a drive. But then I can tell you, walking up to the Grand Canyon edge, I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget it. Years later, my wife and the boys and I got to go see it, and it was more than a picture could ever begin to prepare you for. So, my hope is that when you start to work through some of these questions and some of these issues and concerns, that you go and do it. I never want you to look back and wish that you had done it. And so maybe what you need is somebody helping you through that process of taking that next step and holding your hand. Sometimes we just need, I'm going to say this is really big deal. Sometimes we just need permission from somebody else to do the thing that's in our brain. Sometimes you just need someone to come to you and say, I give you permission to take that step and that leap of faith. And I encourage you to do it so that you can have the experience of a lifetime. So, what do you think? All right, maybe you've been thinking. I hope that you've been thinking through this some. That what are some of the questions that I've got about traveling, and what are some of the things that what are the things I need to buy, or where do I need to go? And um, you know what? I want to share some things with you. So if you'd like the written notes of what we've done today, then I want you to just drop a comment in there. Just say travel in the comments, and I'm going to make sure that you get a copy of our notes from today, so that you can think through some of these questions and some of these answers for yourself. Um, and keep clicking on here, and make sure that you're getting notifications of when we go live, so that you can keep getting some of these answers in this process that we're working through. But ultimately, I hope that you guys are going to take that leap of faith and take that next step of getting on the road and experiencing some of the things that this amazing country has to offer. So, um, so let me know below the questions that you want me to talk about and things that you want me to try to answer for you. And then I'll be here again next week at 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time right now. So whatever time that is for you, I'm not sure, but I hope that you are going to be able to enjoy and learn from some of this process. But really, my biggest hope is that you're going to be able to experience some of the things. Um, there's never been a better time, never a better opportunity than right now. So, hey, thanks for following along. If you're still here, thanks so much for being here this long, and I can't wait to catch up with you a little bit more later on. Have a great day.